Welcome back, witches. Welcome to week 2 of Beginning a Witch's Apothecary, presented by Witch With Me and myself, Josie Hellebore. So this week, what we're going to be discussing for this specific module in Module 4 is oils. This is a 2-part module, so the first video we're going to do is going to be on oils, and then later on we'll talk about the other parts of this module. Now, you should have read the PDF that accompanies this video, and if you did, you would have read the different techniques of making oils. So we're going to discuss those today, and we're also going to make an oil together. And this is where you're going to want to have that herbal blend that I told you about last week. Make sure that you have that on deck because we will be using it. Oils are one of the most versatile tools that a witch can have in their apothecary. The oils I'm referring to are not essential oils, although we can use those for magical and medicinal purposes. The oils that I'm referring to in this module are herbal infused oils that we create by using a base oil such as olive oil, grapeseed oil, shea oil, vitamin E oil. The possibilities are endless. You infuse that with the herbs and flowers to create the oils that I'm speaking of. These specific blends can sometimes be called condition oils, conjure oils, or just simply magical oils or magic oils. You can use them for so many different things. You can use them to bless and anoint candles with, which we will talk about in the second part of this module this week. You can use them to anoint yourself and others, people. You can use them to anoint, bless, and enchant items such as talismans, amulets, tools, wands, cauldrons. You can use them to enchant your doors for protection. You can use them to enchant your wallet, your money, a number of things. The possibilities are endless. You can even use some diluted amount, small amount of oil in floor washes, which we discussed in last week. I personally love using my oils as a spiritual perfume to help attract or draw those things towards me, those energies and those goals and those desires that I have, to draw those towards me. And adjacently, to help repel and remove and protect me from unwanted or malicious energies, negative energies. If people are trying to do work against me, wishing ill against me, you know, there's so much power in thought and intent. And somebody can literally give you bad juju, or give you like just by manifesting bad things about you, or just being jealous of your achievements. So using some protection oil is a great way to ward yourself against that. You just simply take some of the oil, dab it behind your ears, dab it on your wrists, on the crown of your head, on your chest, even on your ankles. Wherever you would use a perfume, you can use that oil for that. Sometimes I use combinations of oils like that. I use maybe a road opening as well as a money oil when I'm trying to achieve some financial success and I feel like there's a barrier preventing me from attaining that success. So the road opening oil would help clear the path to achieve the goal, and then the money drawing or prosperity oil could help draw in the financial success. And another one that I like to use is Crown of Success oil, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But I can add Crown of Success oil to almost anything that I'm doing just to give it an added layer of success. Just basically the icing on the cake, so to speak. I wanted to share some of my favorite oil blends with you guys, and some of these blends I made myself, and some of them are still available for purchase in my Etsy and on my website, and then some of these I've made without the intention of selling, just for my own personal use. And I also have some oils that I have purchased or been gifted by other witches, spiritual workers, brujos, priests, priestesses, etc. And I support their products 100%, stand by them, absolutely great. So what I'd like to do now is I want to kind of go over some of those with y'all and talk about what I use them for, what you can use them for, and just kind of give you some ideas that there's an extensive range of oils that you can make. Now, I did give you that starter witch recipe PDF, and that's just your basic, 5 staple recipes that you're going to want to use, or going to be able to use to do all kinds of manifestation. But you can get very, very creative with this. And having a good understanding of herbs and their correspondences will help you to be as creative as you want and come up with totally new blends to use for yourself, or maybe even if you're thinking of opening your own online shop or, you know, brick and mortar shop. Having a good understanding of herbs and how you can apply them and how you can make oils can only help strengthen your cause in that regard. So with no further ado, we'll go ahead and discuss some of my favorite oils that I use on a regular basis. The first three oils I'm going to go over with you are oils that are my own recipe that I made, that I came up with, and the ones I was telling you about that I also sell in my online store. The first one is my Make It Rain Money Oil. I'm going to kind of shake it up and then show you. And I like to keep certain herbs and pieces of bark and seeds and things like that in my oil blends. I, of course, strain out a vast majority of the herbs and stuff when I'm doing my emulsification, and then I'll add these back in when bottling. It just adds to the scent, to the fragrance, and to the intention of the oil, especially when I speak further intent into what I'm adding. So like that's a piece of cinnamon stick, cloves, allspice, and you would re-speak your intentions into that. So this is one of my favorite blends. I came up with this a few years ago, and I continue to update it and improve upon it as my skill set grows and my experience grows, and you will do the same thing. So you're going to start to learn like, oh, I like that recipe, but what if I add a little bit more of this? The more you mess with creating oils, the greater understanding you're going to have of how herbs emulsify and which ones are of a stronger note than others, like we discussed in the video on teas. So hibiscus is really strong, and it has a really strong flavor that tends to dominate. Lavender has a really strong smell that tends to dominate. So you start to learn like what's less dominant and what's more dominant, and that kind of helps you, you know, come into play with your ratios and your portions and all things like that. The next oil on the list is my Fortress Protection Oil. And this oil I created several years ago. And you can see it's got some sprigs of rosemary and some other seeds and stuff in there. And this Fortress Protection Oil is just like the name says. It creates a protective wall around anyone wearing it, or if you wanted to protect your home, I oftentimes will take protection oil and put my finger and just spread it over the top of my doors, outside and inside of my main doors, my front door or my back door. You can do that above windows too, and that just helps any kind of negative energies, attachments, forces, people that would do you or your family harm. It prevents all of that from even making it through into your home. That's one way you can use these. Also, if I'm going to an environment where I'm not sure how safe it is, either physically, spiritually, psychically, emotionally, or in any sense, then I would arm up with some protection oil. No, that is not the same exact blend. Neither one of those are the same exact blend as the one on your starter witch recipe, so I just want to say that. I encourage you to take those starter witch recipes and kind of tweak them to make them your own. Add some things, remove some things, just play with it, play with the smells, play with the intentions, and also play and journal about the outcomes of those experiments when you do them. Journaling is so important. I have a book of shadows that I write my recipes over and over again, and when I change them up a little bit, I add what I changed, and then I always put a date on it, and then, you know, I'll put, so if this is my third batch of making Make It Rain Money Oil, specifically that blend, I'll write, you know, this is my third time, and this is what was different. That way I'm cataloging it and getting it documented for further use. If you try to just remember this stuff off the top of your head, you might be able to remember it the first couple of oils that you make, but as you keep making more things, more oils, and more other creations that we're going to talk about in this course, as you continue making things like that, then you're going to lose track of everything that you put into it. It's just kind of like whenever you're cooking and you come up with a great recipe, if you don't catalog it on that recipe card, you're going to lose it. So I can't stress to you how important it is to, at the very least, have a notebook, a journal, something that you can write your recipes in and write notes on, and how how it worked for you, how it didn't work for you, things you liked about it, things you didn't like about it, changes that you made, changes that you want to make, and always date it. That way you kind of have a reference. I love going through my book of shadows and looking at things I did in 2013 or 2014, and just looking back on those old recipes and witnessing how far I've come in my craft and how much I've learned. And oh man, when I remember when I used to think that, or oh, I totally forgot I did that. That was a great idea. Somehow I lost it along the way. I'm gonna start doing that again. One thing that I used to do a lot is I used to do a lot of intention setting journaling on the new moon. I'll be honest, I don't do that as much anymore. It's not that I don't do any kind of spell work on the new moon. I absolutely do. But the rituals have changed for me, and journaling has kind of fallen by the wayside. So that's something that I personally, in my craft, want to start doing again, is setting those new moon intentions. And then that's when, you know, they talk about manifestation with like a poster board or something like that. You literally put that list of your intentions somewhere where you can physically see it, be it the list itself, the journal entry itself, or pictures that signify those things, and that will help you manifest those things. So that's one thing that I really enjoy about having a grimoire and a book of shadows, is that I can look back on my past experiences and either draw on them or kind of muse at them, you know, oh wow, that was funny, or re-implement them into my craft. The third oil blend that I make that I want to share with you guys is the other one that I sell online, is my Birds and Bees Love and Sex Attracting Oil. And you can see it's got different flowers and herbs in there. That's kind of one thing that's a staple of the oils that I sell online. I just think it looks really pretty, and you'll find that there's a lot of other workers out there that do the same thing. So this oil, as the name says, Birds and Bees, pretty much tells you everything you need to know. This is good to attract a new lover to you, a new love in your life. I don't ever guarantee that it's going to be somebody that you're going to be with for a long time, but it will be somebody that you're going to have a good time with. So if you're just wanting to attract a new friend with benefits into your life, or you want to just kind of date people, but you're kind of in a lull and haven't really found anybody that you want to date and have fun with, and that's what you're looking for, this can help in that as well. And then if you really do want a genuine love, this can also help attract that into your life. Of course, no guarantees that it will be the love of your life, your soulmate, twin flame, any of those things, but it will bring that love and romance and lust and all of those things into your life. Now, you can make attraction oils by using things that have the properties that you're wanting to bring in. So one thing that we're going to discuss a little bit further on when we start talking about herb baths is attraction and removing herbs, and how they're kind of classified into two different categories in that way. And when you have that understanding, as well as the correspondences that we already discussed, then you're really going to open up your world of what you can create and tap into that creativity, and the possibilities are going to be endless. So I'm not going to tell you everything that went into this, because like I said, it is a recipe that I sell online, but I just wanted to show you that you can get really creative with it. Now you can do some other things that are love centered. Some people like to do self-love, like that's a really big thing right now, and I think it's really well needed. Self-love, I think a lot of people are in great need of, and sometimes try to replace that void with people in the form of romantic relationships. And so self-love is another popular concoction and formula that people use. And those herbs and flowers that you use for that would be a little bit different than what you would use for this. So the more you learn about herbs and correspondences, the more you'll be able to apply them to make the exact oil to manifest the outcome that you're desiring. Now I want to talk about some oils that I use that other witches make, or other brujos or brujas, priests, spiritual workers, what have you. The first one that I want to talk about is Miss Rain's Hot Foot Oil. Now Miss Rain is amazing, and she has a fabulous website. She has a fabulous Instagram. If you're not following Rain's Conjure Shop on IG, please do so. She has some of the best, most creative oil blends that are out there. They get very, very specific. She has a myriad of different oils. Rain is an initiated yayi, and she is very, very knowledgeable on herbs and also on crystals, and she's just a great all-around person and one of my favorite members of the spiritual community. And so hot foot oil, if you're familiar with hot foot powder, it removes a person from the situation. So say you have a coworker that's super annoying and just not a good person, totally not good. You want them removed, or you have a neighbor that's really bad and like always doing bad stuff and always having the cops called on them because they're doing bad things. You know, whatever the case may be, there's somebody in your life that you're wanting to remove for whatever reason. Hot foot oil would be what you would use. Just like hot foot powder, its powder counterpart would be used. Typical way to use hot foot powder would be to sprinkle it on the path of the person that you want to remove. So say it was a coworker and you know that they park their car in the same spot every day, you could covertly, because you don't want anyone to see you, sprinkle some hot foot powder right where they're going to park their car, and when they step over it, it can act to move them out of that situation quickly. So you can do the same thing similarly to hot foot oil, but what I like best about hot foot oil is I can hit a target from my own living room. So using hot foot powder, I have to put the powder to where it's going to make physical contact with the target. It's not so with hot foot oil. Say there's somebody in your life that's like a bully, or just maybe bullying your child or something like that. I would never do anything like this unless it wasn't justified. So I'm not gonna just hot foot somebody just because I get a wild hair, or they're just have an annoying personality to me. That would be really immature spiritually, and it's also asking for some certain repercussions. When you're gonna do stuff like this, you need to make sure that it's justified. Anyways, so what you could do is you could dress a candle, which we're going to learn about here shortly, with some oil like this, and it could remove that target. It could hit the target and move them out of your life, remove them from the situation, and be successful in that without you ever having to make contact with them with this product. The next oil that I'm going to talk about is King Midas oil. There we go. And this oil is made by one of my favorite Texas brujos, Mystic Matt DeLeon. And his company is called Elements, Realms, and Beyond. And he has great fixed candles. He has great oils. He also makes amazing soaps. Oh my gosh, he has Florida water soap and King Midas accompanying soap that work fabulously. So you can see again that when he makes his oils, he adds herbs and petals and all kinds of things in there as well. It's a pretty popular thing to do. If you notice, Miss Rain did it on hers also. King Midas oil is very similar to the next oil we're going to discuss, which is Crown of Success oil. And basically it turns all things to gold, brings success, and illuminates and adds effectiveness and success into every single situation it's brought into. That's just one of those icing on the cake mixtures. And then lastly, the one I want to talk to y'all about is by Raven's Alley. As you can see, I've had this for a while and I've used almost all of it. I'm gonna have to get more. This is Crown of Success oil, which is another great blend that you can either make yourself or purchase from a witch. And like King Midas, it brings success into any situation that it's used in. Like I said earlier, so that for me, a popular combination with Crown of Success is going to be any prosperity works, road opening works, protection works, hex removal works, anything like that to just give me an added layer of success and manifesting that. I'm going to use that. And that's just a few ways that you can use oils and some out of the box different formulas and recipes that are out there. Like I said, the possibilities are endless. And so the reason that I show you those is to just let you know that there are all kinds of possibilities, and to kind of trigger you to use your imagination and to push yourself beyond what I've given you on the Starter Witch recipe page to create your own and get as creative with it as you can. There are oils out there that are meant to attract lovers specifically for gay males, like to attract male lovers. Same thing for women. There are oils out there like Jezebel oils that are supposed to help you attract a sugar daddy specifically. Like, you can get very, very specific with oils down to the very pinpoint desired outcome. And that's one of my favorite things about oils, is that you can get so specific, and you can also be broad with it. It's kind of open to interpretation and how you want to use them. Now we're going to go over some of the different techniques for creating your own oils. The first method that we're going to discuss today is the double boiler method. Now, for the double boiler method, for the double boiler method, you're going to need to have 2 heat-safe containers, one larger than the other. So, for instance, what I use is a large stock pot and a smaller glass measuring cup. When I use double boiler method, I use this stock pot, and I also use this glass measuring cup. I keep it pretty simple. There's really no need to complicate it. Now, there are double boilers out there that you can purchase, but it isn't necessary. In my opinion, the purchased double boiler doesn't work any better than just using a stock pot and another container that's glass or heat safe. One of my favorite things about using a glass measuring cup for my inner container when I do this method is that it has the lip that makes it easy to pour. And I find that when I'm working with liquids, be it oils, salves, tinctures, anything of that nature, having that lip as well as those funnels we discussed is really going to help me not make a big old mess. Now, you can use the double boiler if you would like, but I can tell you that using a glass measuring cup with that lip on it is going to be the less messy route to go. Again, feel free to go any direction with this that you like. There's no wrong way to do it, either using a stock pot and glass measuring cup or actually buying a double boiler. Either way works. But I stand by the glass measuring cup, and I think that you will too once you use it and see it in action. Now, how the double boiler method works is you take your stock pot or your larger container that you're going to use, the outer container, and you're going to fill it about halfway with water. And then you're going to take your inner container, whatever that might be, either the glass measuring cup or the inner part of the purchased double boiler, and you're going to place that inside the larger one into the water. And then you're going to go ahead and place your base oil and your herb blend directly into that inner container. And then you're going to start to heat the water up. You don't want to ever put in the glass container into already boiling water, because it can cause it to crack, and then you're going to have a big old mess, and plus you're going to break your glass measuring cup. So you always want to put that glass container in the water first, then turn your heat on. Once you turn your heat on, you go ahead and bring the water to the boil. And as the water comes to a boil, it heats up the contents of the inner container, but the inner container is not able to get as hot as the outer container because it's not directly on your heat source. And this is what can help prevent burning, which is one of the cons. The diminished likelihood of your oil burning is one of the pros to this method. Now, as the oil heats up, it will cause the herbs to start to release their constituents, their flavors, their aromas, and their fragrances, and all those great, goody, herbal constituents that you want into your oil. The con with this method is with that inner container being open, a lot of times some of that fragrance and some of that, essence from the herbs can just be cooked away, and it can float away in the steam. So that's one of the downsides to this technique. But again, it is a safe way to do this because you allow your mixture to heat up, but not so much that you burn it. So that's a double-edged sword there. After your oil blend has emulsified thoroughly, and you can kind of tell that the herbs have kind of dissipated a little bit and their essence has seeped into the oil for at least as much as it's going to, then you would go ahead and turn the heat off, and you're going to pull your oil blend inner container out of the heat source. You're going to allow that to cool, and you can pour it into the jar, a mason jar, and allow it to cool and put the lid on it. And at that point, once it cools, you can use it. I would strongly advise you do not try to strain it while it's still hot. If you want to strain out those herbs and seeds and bark or whatever it is that you used in your blend, wait until the mixture has cooled. And once it's cooled, that's when you would use that cheesecloth or the nylon pantyhose I was telling you about to actually strain it. And I'll give you a demonstration of what that looks like when we get into actually making the oil together. Now let's talk about our second method of making oil blends, and that is the dark emulsification method. Now this method is great. It's simple, it's easy, it's the easiest of all the methods that we're going to talk about today. Really, all you need is 3, possibly 4 ingredients / supplies. So you're going to need your mason jar, of course, you're going to need your base oil, and you're going to need your herb blend. And if you would like, you can use aluminum foil, just enough to wrap around the jar. How this works is you simply put your herb blend into the mason jar, you top off with your base oil, you tighten that lid real tight, and then you let it dark emulsify. Now, how you can use that foil is you can use that to further make sure that no light gets into the mixture and just wrap it around the glass outside of the jar. And then you're going to take that jar and you're going to put it in a pantry, a closet, somewhere dark, somewhere cool, and you're just going to forget about it. And the reason I say you're just going to forget about it is because it's going to take a while to emulsify. Now, yes, it's the simplest and the easiest route, and it's perfect for if you don't need the oil right now. If you've got the time and you just want to make use of herbs that you've got in your garden or that you've dried out, or just kind of want to have some blends on hand for the future, going through your herb collection, things like that, then this method is absolutely perfect. If you need a blend right here, right now, for a specific purpose, it can't wait, then this wouldn't be the option for you. That is the con about this technique. It's great, it works wonderfully. I have left things to emulsify for over a year, and oh my gosh, it is amazing. But we don't all have over a year. Sometimes we have things we need to do, and we need to do it now. So in that instance, it might not be the option for you, but it is one of the easiest and simplest out there. Here's an example of an oil that I'm making right now doing the dark emulsification method. I took this out of my closet in my witch room just to show you guys. And I showed y'all earlier. So this is just some pine that I foraged, and I showed you that in the video on foraging when we did our first week modules. And so basically I just took the pine stems, the needles, and there's even a couple of pine cones in there, and I just shoved them down in there. And then I topped it off with my oil. And for this one, I didn't use the foil. Sometimes I do. This time I didn't. I just place it in my closet in here, and it's completely dark. I close the closet door. No light can get to it. Now, I don't need any pine oil right away, but I do want to have some really nice, fragrant green pine oil. So I'm going to let this baby sit. I'm going to let this baby sit for probably about 6 months. And I'll know it's 6 months because, like we talked about before, I labeled and I dated. So this was actually July 4th that I did this. So we'll be able to see in 6 months from now where it's at. And if I just come up and I look at it like this and hold it up to the light, I can see that there's a little bit of discoloration. Now, not as much as I would like. That's another way that you're going to know that your dark and cold emulsifications have worked properly, is that they will take on the color of the herbs and things that are inside the jar. So this guy's got a long way to go. Once it's green, when it's taken on that green hue, then I'm going to know that it's going to be a batch of goodness in there. And that brings us to the third technique we're going to talk about, and that is the crock pot technique. For this technique, I actually purchased a small little crock pot, $20 at the grocery store. You can use a big size one if you want, especially if your intentions are to make a large batch of oil. I'm just going to be completely transparent and honest with you guys and tell you that this technique is a little tricky. I have had some success with this technique, but I've also had a lot of failures with this technique. Now, I know a lot of elders in the community, a lot of old root workers, cunning folk, witches, all of that swear by this technique and use it to great success. But for me, you have to have the right kind of crock pot that can be at a low enough temperature. If you turn it too high of a temperature, then you're going to completely burn your batch. And I've done that more times than I'd like to admit. even on the lowest setting on that crock pot, it still gets too hot. And I have tried a couple of different methods or a couple of different batches of oils with that specific crock pot, and I've had the same result. I've even tried with my larger crock pot that I have that has a little bit better heating element in it and gets a little bit lower, and still the likelihood that you're going to burn your batch is pretty high, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So what I would suggest is that if you want to try that, don't put all of your batch into the crock pot. Save half of it. Save half of it and do one of the other methods that we talked about. In fact, just do half of it in a dark emulsification. Just put it in a jar, put it with the oil, put it in the closet, forget about it, and then the other half experiment with the crock pot method. That way, if you do burn your batch, you didn't just completely destroy all of your oil. I'm telling you this from my own experience. I made a really awesome self-love oil that I was kind of talking about how you can make self-love oils and stuff earlier. I made a really awesome blend. I mean, it smelled fabulous, all the herbs and everything. And it was the last of some of those herbs that I had in my collection at the time. Well, I decided to put the whole thing, the whole shebang into the crock pot and ended up burning it. And I can tell you that burnt chamomile smells really, really gross. And I was so disappointed. I had to throw it all away. There was no way that I could recoup or salvage it. It was actually almost kind of singed in color. That's how burnt it was. But if you do want to try this method, and I wouldn't discourage that, I think you should try all of these methods and see what you like best and what works best for you. Maybe you have a super awesome crock pot, or you just have the magic touch and this is the method that works best for you. I don't want to discourage anyone from trying any of these methods. I'm just telling you my own personal experiences and what's been more beneficial for me. Now, to use this method, it's simple enough. You take your crock pot, you plug it in, and you put it on a low setting. You add your oil in and your herbs right away. Again, low setting. Put the lid on and come and check on it periodically and stir with a wooden spoon. That's pretty much all there is to it. Just turn the heat on and let the heat element sit long enough for the herbs to begin to give off those fragrances and flavors and awesome constituents and essences that they have, right? And once it starts to do that, you can actually turn off the heat, put the lid back on it, and just kind of let it seep like that. And then, just like the other technique, like that I was telling you about with the double boiler, you want to go ahead and wait until it cools before you try to strain. Go ahead and pour it into your jar, allow it to cool, and then once it's cooled, then you can use your cheesecloth or your pantyhose to strain. And that's the simple crock pot method. And that brings us to my personal favorite technique for making oils. I'm sure I'm not the only witch out here that uses this technique, but I've never seen it used before, and it's something that's been really successful for me. So what I did was I took the aspects of all of the different techniques I knew, my favorite aspects, what worked best, and I created this one. And it was through trial and error that I came to this discovery, so to speak. So this technique was birthed from two things. It was birthed from my impatience with the dark emulsification technique, as well as my disparity to burning batches of oil in the crock pot or allowing the steam to take away the herbal essences from the double boiler technique. So like I said, I kind of coupled everything together and did pros and cons, figured out what worked best, and this is what I came up with. I came up with the dark emulsification double boiler combo method. This method not only reduces the risk of burning your oil blend, but it also cuts down on emulsification time and increases potency, which were everything that I was looking for. I wanted super potent oils. I didn't want to have to wait 6 months all the time to get them, and I also didn't want to burn my whole batch in my own impatience. This method is actually pretty simple too. So what I do is I take my herb blend and I put it in my jar, and I top it off with my oil, my base oil, and put the lid on. So far, just like the dark emulsification technique, right? Well, instead of just throwing it in my closet and forgetting about it for 6 months, I take my stock pot and I fill it halfway with water, and I put the jar inside of the stock pot and I bring the water to a boil. What this does is it allows for the glass jar to act as the inner container for the double boiler, but the lid on the jar prevents all of the fragrances and flavors and constituents from melting away. Now the glass barrier also prevents burning because it's not directly on the heat source. Now you can do this with the double boiler, and you can also do this with the crock pot if you decide to use the crock pot as the outer container of your water for your double boiler. I've done that before too. If you're going to use the little crock pot, make sure you use a shorter jar. That way you can put the lid on. Without the lid on, the crock pot really won't get hot enough to effectively do the double boiler method. If you're going to use a big crock pot, of course you can use a little bit bigger jar, but just do a little test run and put your jar inside the crock pot and put the lid on, and just make sure that it's not going to be too tall to prevent it from closing all the way. And from that point, you're just gonna monitor the oil, and it's easier to do it when you have it in a stock pot and you can look, but you're gonna start to be able to tell inside the jar. You'll see kind of little bubbles coming up, and you'll be able to see the way that the herbs are kind of wilting and changing. You're going to start to realize that they are emulsifying and blending in with the oil. Now with the crock pot with the lid on, you're just gonna have to take the lid off and take an oven mitt, don't burn yourself, take an oven mitt and pull the jar out and just see kind of where it's at. Now, you don't have to do this for a long time. You can do it for about 30 minutes. Really, I just do it long enough to get my herbs going, just to, it's kind of like a little extra Kickstarter, just an extra little boost, just to get them started going. Once I see that that's happened, I take them off of I turn the heat off and allow it to cool. And once it's completely cooled, that's when I implement the dark emulsification technique. So the remainder of the emulsification, once it's cooled, it will be in the dark, cool place, further steeping. Keep the herbs in there, do not strain them even after the batch cools, because that's what's gonna help this specific blend get even stronger. Now, I say you can leave them in there, leave them in the closet or the dark space for another 2 to 3 weeks, but you aren't limited to that. You can leave them as long as you want. Just remember, the longer that you let your herbs steep in your oil, no matter what technique it is, you're going to get a more potent mixture. I think that doing it this way is a lot safer. If you keep your oil on the heat element for an extended period of time, you do take the risk of burning it no matter what method you're using. Therefore, I think that the best way and the most efficient way that I have found to make oils is to use the best parts of both of them. So use it in a jar, the double boiler, allow the oil to start to get hot. You'll see the herbs change, you'll see them start to release oxygen, bubbles coming off, things like that. Then you know it's working. Take it off of the heat element, allow it to cool, put it in your closet, set a calendar date for 3-4 weeks from now. You can wrap it in foil if you'd like. Again, that added layer of preventing any light from getting in there. And then you're gonna have a really potent blend. So now that we've talked about all the different techniques that you can use to make your oils, I would like for us to make an oil together. So for part of your homework last week, I told you that you'll need to have some, either one or more, you can even have all of them, those herb blends put aside, already ground up and ready to roll, because we're gonna be using it to make into an oil. And you should also have your base oil, and you should also have the supplies that you need for the double boiler method. If you want to use crock pot, if you want to use any other method, by all means do so. What I'm going to demonstrate for you guys is the technique that I just told you about, is the dark emulsification and the double boiler combo. And then I'll show you how you can strain once it's cool using the cheesecloth or the pantyhose. One example that I did want to show you is an oil that I did this with. Now, like I said, I have been allowing it to dark emulsify for the remainder, but this is another blend of money draw oil, and I don't know, it's kind of hard to see with the lighting, but it's pretty dark. It is no longer that color that the oil was. This was olive oil, so it's pretty yellow and kind of clear in its hue on its own. You can tell that this has emulsified quite a bit, and now it's very dark. And so what I did with this one is I actually put it in my crock pot because it's small, and I let it get hot, and I left it in there for about 30-45 minutes until I started to see the oxygen bubbles coming off of the herbs. And then I turned off the heat, took it off, let it cool to room temperature, and then I proceeded to put this in my closet in my witch room, where it has been for probably 6 months. At this point, it's ready to be bottled and used. I just honestly need to buy my bottles off of Amazon. I purchased these 2-ounce glass vials off of Amazon just because it's the most cost-effective way. You can get them from hobby stores and craft stores, but they're going to be pretty expensive. I like these because I also bought those droppers in bulk so I can easily drop them with my droppers. Now, you can also purchase the glass vials that have the dropper already built in. It's on the lid, and so you just squeeze it and drop. I know that you guys have seen those before too. You can do that also. It's totally up to you. Those, I think it's like 12 or 24 packs for close to between $10 and $20. So it's pretty affordable. Of course, with all of that kind of stuff, the more you buy, the cheaper it is. And so now let's move on to our next exercise and let's make an oil. Bring your herbs and your supplies. Hey witches, welcome back. So now we're going to make our oil, and the oil blend that I'm going to be making off of the Starter Witch recipe page is the healing blend. So I have chamomile, lavender, sweet marjoram, and rosemary. And it also included a couple of the additives. I added roses and borage to my mix. So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take our blends. If you already have yours put together and ground up, then you're a little bit ahead of the game. If you don't, now will be the time to get that done. Don't forget to speak your intentions into your herb blend as you're making it so that your plants know exactly what purpose you want for them to serve. Now that we've taken our lids off of our jars, we are free to go ahead and take our herbs, speak our intentions into them, and to place them into your object that you're going to grind in if you haven't done this part already. If you have, you can just sit back and relax and get ready. When you're making oils, one thing to remember is it's totally okay to have stems in the mixture. I know that, when we were doing the tea and we were grinding up for incense, we were taking a lot of those big chunks out, but you don't have to do that with oils because the stems themselves actually hold a lot of the essences and the flavors and aromas and all of the things that, we want to reap the benefits of in the herbs. So you can go ahead and leave the stems in there. For my borage, these are just dried borage flowers that I have, so I won't be placing any stems there, but I am going to be using quite a bit of the flowers. And of course, my chamomile, you will see me use this a lot. This is one of my favorite flowers to use in my craft. As you can see, I'm not being super scientific about it, to be honest. I'm just kind of going with my intuition at this point, going with my instincts and what feels right. And my other staple is roses. As you can tell, I have a lot of them. I use them quite a lot. They really are super versatile, more than people realize. Oh, my little cup's almost getting full. Now, some of these really don't need to be ground up, and since I've got so many on here, I'm probably not really going to grind too much. Totally up to you what you think. Now, there are a lot of different ways to speak your intentions into your herbs or your plants, or pray your intentions into them. The way I do it is very, very simple. I simply say something along the lines of, I take this borage and chamomile and I activate and bless it to be used for the properties of healing. May it bring healing to all those who use it. I command it, so it is. And that's the basic line that I use for every blend that I make. I just interject what the purpose is and what the plant is. Now, my grinder got really, really full, so what I did was I went ahead and I took out some of it so I can easily kind of grind these up. I'm not going to grind up too much, just a little bit, just to kind of get those dried herbs to reopen. Once they have reopened and the skin has kind of been broken on some of them, they tend to be a lot more giving with their constituents. Depending on the size of your jar and the amount of herbs that you're going to use, you might want to get a funnel of some sort so that you can transfer your herbs into your jar the least messy as possible. And I also have my trusty barbecue skewer, so I can just kind of stir that in there, and it helps. You can see, I know it's a quilted jar, but you can see it helps it go through there. And that's for the bigger pieces. I use these barbecue skewers all the time. We're going to use them for our next exercise as well. I'll probably use that exact same one, as I typically use them over and over until I no longer can, just because, again, touching on being waste-free or as waste-free as possible. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and squish all my herbs down into the jar. Again, always speaking the intention. So as I get to herbs that I haven't yet spoken intentions into, I'm going to be sure to do that. I take this rose and I activate it to be used for the healing properties that are associated with it. I ask the spirit of the plant to activate and bless this herb for the purpose of healing. I command it, so it is. And just keep doing it that way for each one of your herbs. You can do them individually, which is what I would suggest, or you can kind of do it together in a blend and just make sure you call out each herb specifically. Just adding in my last ingredient, which is my rosemary, and I'll go ahead and pray over that one as well. I call on the spirit of the plant rosemary to activate and bless this plant. Infuse it with the properties of healing, so it may bring healing to all those who use it. I command it, so it is. And since they hold so much scent in the stems, rosemary, I'm just gonna kind of like break them up a little bit, little zigzags so they'll fit, and just put them in there. There's no reason to let that good oil that's in that stem go to waste. Okay, so now that we've got that done, we're just gonna go ahead and top off our herbal blend with some olive oil. You don't have to use olive oil, that's the oil that I'm using. You can use grapeseed oil or any of the other oils that we mentioned before. Just make sure that you take your base oil and completely cover it. So I'm going to go completely over the top and submerge it. And because this is a small jar and there's quite a bit of herbs, this is going to be a pretty potent mixture when it's finally done. Now, as you can see, there's still some that are dry, the oil hasn't gotten there, so you'll see the oxygen bubbles float up. And as the oxygen bubbles float up, you know that the oil is going to the bottom. So I usually let that happen, let the oil go down a little bit, and then I know to add in some more. What we want is we want for everything to be completely immersed and submerged in oil. We don't want any spots to be dry. Now, of course, we're easily going to put our lid on our jar so that we can tighten it and shake it up really good and make sure everything's mixed together. So that's going to be the next thing that we do. Definitely make sure you tighten it as tight as it can go. The last thing you want is to leave your lid loose and then go to shake it and get oil everywhere. I actually have an oil right now in my witch closet that happened with, and I feel like every time I pick it up, I get oil on me, and no matter how many times I wipe it off, that oil's just there. It's kind of like glitter. Never goes away. So you're just going to shake it up really well. So now we can see that everything is immersed. There's no parts that are dry. All the herbs are mixed together very well. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is place it in the middle of the stock pot. Now I have a stock pot already here prepared with my water halfway full. If you don't have that, then go ahead and get that ready. If you're not using a stock pot, whatever you are using for your outer container of your double boiler method, go ahead and get that set up now. Okay, so here's my stock pot that I'm going to use, and as you can see, I've got it about halfway full of water, a little bit less than half actually, because this is a smaller jar. If it was a larger jar, then I would by all means use more water. So just place it in the center, and now you're going to go ahead and turn on your heat. Yeah, shameless plug of my 1953 Westinghouse stove, and it works. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on medium-high, just to kind of get things going a little bit, and I'm going to turn it down to medium as things start to heat up. This is just to kind of get everything going. Now you do the same. Go ahead and turn your water on, don't put it on high, and monitor it. Now, if you decided to go ahead and make more than one of the herbal oil blends off of the Start a Witch recipe page that you have, that's totally fine. You can pause this video at any time and go ahead and get the rest of your herb blends into their jars safely and topped off with oil. And just hit play whenever you're ready to reconvene. In the meantime, let's let our water heat up, and I'll see y'all in a few minutes. It's been about 5 or so minutes, and as you can see, things are starting to heat up. And you can see that there's bubbles on the outside of the glass. And what we're going to look for is when we start to see more of the bubbles inside. Just a few more minutes, and now as you can see, the water is really going now. It's really bubbling, and so we're going to start to see that boil. Still looking for, some indications that our oil is heating up in there, and you're going to want an oven mitt too. It still looks like they're fairly similar to how they were when we initially put them in, so that just means that it hasn't quite gotten hot enough in there. Now we really only need to keep this going for probably about 20 minutes. Once you get it boiling and you can see that it's heating up in there, you don't want to overdo it. You just want to heat it up long enough to kind of stimulate those herbs, to release those essences and aromas and flavors. Okay, so at this point, my jar has been in the boiling water for about 20 minutes. Taking my oven mitt, I'm just going to kind of pick it up and see and just investigate. And you can kind of tell, especially like with the lavender, that it's starting to change. It's starting to open up, the color's starting to seep out. And you can also see, when you pull it out, you're going to see steam coming off the jar, which is kind of hard to capture here. Let me try it this way. So you know that the contents inside are pretty hot. So at this point, you would be safe to go ahead and remove it from the heat. If you choose to leave it in a little bit longer, you can. One thing I want to point out is, see how those herbs are rising to the top? There. You know it's heating up, and you know it's emulsifying. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and remove my jar from the heat and let it cool. I don't know if it's hot where you're at, but it's pretty hot where I am, and having the boiling water in the kitchen has not helped. As you can see, I'm sweaty, and also I was chasing my chickens and my dogs around in my yard while the water was boiling. So there's that. See, now you can really see all the steam coming off. I'm going to go ahead and let this cool now. And turn that heat off so that it stops making this kitchen hotter than it needs to be. Now, one thing about this method is, even though it's going to be faster than the dark emulsification method, we are still going to emulsify it once it's cooled in the dark for a couple more weeks. That being said, your oil that you made today, right now, might not be quite ready yet to use right away, or for our next exercise, which is going to be dressing candles. You can still use it if you would like. Just take a little bit out. It's still going to have those properties, but I would definitely close it back up and store it so that it can become more potent. but don't let that deter you from using it. If you want to, you can also just pray and infuse your base oil with the intentions that you would like, and just use that as an oil, or you can use some essential oils to dress your candle with for the next exercise. I'm also going to show you guys how to strain with pantyhose or cheesecloth, but I'm going to show you with a different oil that I've had emulsifying for a while, so I can let this one do its thing. Okay guys, so this is a demonstration on straining the herbs out of your oil, and what I'm going to use today is, it's an infusion I started a few months back, and literally it's just a bunch of things that I harvested from my garden, and I was drying them out. They kind of got all mixed up, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to make a garden vibe herb oil with them. That's what I did. I just threw them all in there together and have let it emulsify. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate to you, whoop, things are popping out, what that looks like when you strain it. Now, you can do this a couple of ways. You can use the pantyhose, or you can use cheesecloth. As you see, the pantyhose need to be wide enough to where they can go over the outer perimeter of the jar and also seep in a little bit. So what you're going to do, place them on there, and you want it to be a little bit loose, not super loose, but you don't want it to be too tight. And you just tighten the lid on, and now you've got a filter. So now what I do, the easiest thing, is I transfer it into one of my lipped glass measuring cups. And the reason that I do that is because it has the lip, again, like I was saying before, and it keeps the mess down. Now you can put it in another jar if you want to. I could have done that directly into another jar. But this, I just wanted to show you because it's a lot less messy. Now the thing about this part, when you transfer it, you kind of are stuck holding it over until most of it goes through, and I'll show you that in a second. It's kind of a commitment. Now, if you choose to go the cheesecloth route, totally fine, but if you can see, cheesecloth is got a lot larger holes in it than nylon does, which means more liquid's going to seep through. So it's going to work faster, but I would always double or quadruple it. So like this, I have it folded into fourths, and I'll use that. Again, same principle applies. It needs to be large enough to completely cover the rim of the jar and to be able to be poked down a little bit. So I want to make sure I can poke it down, which I can. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten all the way. Don't want to mess. Mine kind of got a little tight on me when I did that, so I'm going to push it back down. Make sure it's, there we go, that's better. Okay, that's pretty good. Just so you guys can see better. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take this, and you're just going to hold it upside down like that. And as you can see, the oil comes through very nicely, very easily. None of the other herbs or anything like that is coming out through it. And you just hold it over like this. And you're going to hold it over until it's done. And it could be several minutes. You can always tap the jar to kind of get things moving around. Okay, so after several minutes of holding it upside down and letting it drain, another thing that you can do to get that last little bit, and it works especially well if you've got a pretty large cloth that you're working with, you can go ahead and dump it upside down again, slowly bring it down, and what you're going to do is you're almost going to create like a sachet type tea bag thing. So I'm going to keep all of those herbs confined in the cheesecloth or the nylon, and this way I can just kind of squeeze it out. Make sure you guys can see that. It's still coming through, and you can just squeeze the rest of that oil out. Now, when you start squeezing, you might get a little bit of herbs and powder stuff that kind of comes through, but for the most part, it's gonna all be caught by that cheesecloth. So now we've got our oil, and you can also see it's really, really green. So that is a sign that the herbs have emulsified fully into the mix. And with that being said, this concludes our exercise on oils. So now we're just going to allow for those other oils to emulsify, and we're going to get ready to move on to our next portion of this module, which is dressing candles. Get your candles ready.